Are broilers GMO? How do we come up with a species that can mature in only 35 days? That is only 5 weeks, and then they will be ready for meat. How do we come up with such an organism? So today in this video, we're going to talk about poultry breeding. I will tell you the GMO part later in the video. So make sure you stick around so that I can explain to you the GMO part in the poultry industry. So guys, before we start this video, make sure you like this video. Please, let's get this video to 100. You know, I usually say like this video and some of you just dislike the video or just pass by. Please, let's get this video to 100 likes, and you can comment where you are watching us from so that we can be able to interact with each other and know each other more, because they know the more we interact with each other, the more we connect, and that is the best part with this world. So guys, like and subscribe to the channel. And for those guys that want to buy me a coffee, the link is down in the description. Click it so that you can be able to support the channel. So this is how it is done. For you to get a broiler that matures in 35 days, they do something known as selective breeding. This is just a simple and overview of poultry breeding. If you have 4 pure lines, A, B, C, D, those are 4 pure lines. You can cross breed between A and B so that you can get AB. Then you cross C and D so that you can get CD. For the AB, you can get the rooster, okay? AB. That has been crossed between A and B. You get the rooster, which will be the parent stock. Then the top one will be the grandparent stock. Now the C and D, you can cross the 2 breeds, C and D, pure lines. Make sure you're crossing the pure lines, C and D. After you have crossed the C and D, down there you will get CD, which will be the female. For the CD, you may look for the characteristics that you need for the female type of that chicken, so you might get it from the CD. Then for the rooster that you get on the CD, you have to cull it out, and for the female that you get on the AB, you have to also cull it out. After you have crossed the AB plus CD, then you come up with an offspring that is ABCD, that has all those characteristic traits of those 4 grandparents. Like for example, for you as a human being, I know you have 4 grandparents. So you as a human being, you have a genetic pool of all your grandparents. You have collected the genetic pool from all your grandparents. Okay, before we continue, let me talk about the 2 types of breeding that you can do. The one type of breeding that one can do is known as inline breeding, and another one is called line breeding. Inline breeding is like inbreeding. Okay, now let me explain. If, for example, you have bought chicks from me and they are commercial, these ones that have F1 of generation, then you take those chicken, because in line breeding, these chicken are not closely related to them having the same parent as per se. Meaning, these chicks have been gotten from several roosters and several females. They can have the same genetic characteristics, but they don't come from the same parent. Do you get it? Because I have many roosters and I have many females. So if those females, they met and then they produce an offspring, those offsprings are only related to each other. They may be like cousins, but they will not be like brothers and sisters. So what you do, you take the 2 breeds, okay? The breed that you have gotten from the parent stock, then you breed them. It's called line breeding. How do you do the proper line breeding? If you want to do the proper line breeding, you have to make sure, if you're having those chickens on your farm, you take those chickens, then you have to raise them for a period of time so that you can get the proper characteristics of the chicken that you need for you to breed. For example, if you are raising the roosters that you want them to mate those hens that are there on your farm, you have to raise them for between 16 to 20 weeks of age so that you may be able to get that perfect characteristics of a rooster. For example, these roosters usually have very different characteristics. If you want to get a rooster that is good for producing eggs, it has this the back side of it around the tail area is very big in size. So that rooster has a characteristics that it will produce a hen that lays more eggs, okay? Because if you want to do breeding, then you're selecting the roosters at a very young age. You won't be able to get the proper characteristics of a chicken that will come up as an offspring. Because if you are doing so, you'll find out that you are selecting some chicks that have, you know, when the chicks are very young, they are all of the same size. If you take those chicks and you try to breed them, you won't be able to know the real characteristics of that chicken, because you will end up getting a rooster that is very small in size and you will want to breed it. That is one thing. And if it is for the female, you have to make sure you are selecting the best female. And the best female is selected between the ages of 26 to 30 weeks of age. Because after that period, you'll know if this chicken is good for laying or if this chicken has reached a bigger body size, if you want to breed it for meat. So that is the best time that you have to select. So you have to buy a very large number of chicken, so that later on in life, other bad birds that you don't need, you can cull them off and sell them off to people who want to sell off meat. Then those good birds that you will have remained with, you will use them for breeding. Now that is called line breeding. Then we go to this one called inline breeding. Inline breeding, this is whereby if you have some chicken like this on the farm and you want to get a good characteristic, maybe this chicken they are losing some characteristics, you have to take this chicken, then you go and mate with the parent that has a better characteristic that you really need out of that chicken. You get it? So what you do, you take the offspring, then you mate it with one of the parent that has that great characteristic that you need to get out of that chicken. So that is what is called inline breeding. Now you know the difference between line breeding and inline breeding. So why do people usually say that broilers are GMO? Okay, GMO can only be found in broilers, whereby if the feed that the broiler has consumed is GMO. I have a very different take on GMO. Many people have different takes on GMO. The only bad thing people usually fear, there are two major things that people usually fear on the GMO part. The first part is that when some of those GMO are constructed, some of those GMO are developed in the lab, they can infuse some chemicals and some bacteria into those plants. For example, if it is for the maize, they can infuse some bacteria into that maize or some chemicals, so that if that maize is grown, no animal will be able to come and consume that maize. So if it is harmful to an animal, that is what they say, if it is harmful to that animal, how will it be harmful to the human body when it is consumed? Do you see that is the danger part of the GMO? Because if they say, if an animal, those pests come and attack that plant, and if it attacks that plant, that pest can die instantly. How can it affect a human being in the long term? But for example, most of these things, like for the corn, it has been GMO'd for a very long time, because the long time maize usually looked like grass. So it has been developed and genetically modified over time. It has become corn, and it is a staple food in many countries here in Africa. So that is one instance. The second bad part of GMO is whereby if those people who are selling to you the GMO seeds, they sell to you these seeds, they are called terminator seeds. These terminator seeds are seeds that if they sell to you one time, those seeds are sterile. They won't be able to produce other seeds, because if you get that seed out of that maize, you won't be able to plant it. So it won't be able to germinate. And if you have those sterile seeds, this means those people who are producing those GMO seeds, they will be selling it at very exorbitant prices, because they are the only one who are supplying those seeds. And they will have made these other plants that were in existence a long time ago become extinct. So that is one major fear of GMO. For example, for a 2 kg bag of maize, of maize seed can be around $5. And if maybe it is for GMO, it can be like $2,000. So that is the only bad part with GMO. And also for GMO in poultry industry, this is where you find that guys say the broilers have been GMO. Broilers are bred in something known as selective breeding. As I have explained, there are several ways that you can do that selective breeding. So for example, as I have said, for the grandparents, these guys usually do that. They do the line breeding or the inline breeding, so that they can get the best characteristic of the parent stock. So it is a very painstaking moment that it usually costs a lot of money and a lot of time. The only solution to that is whereby you can do something known as crossbreeding. According to my research, if you do crossbreeding of these, you will get 50% characteristics of the parent stock, you will get 25% less characteristics of the parent stock, and then you will get 25% more characteristics than the parent stock. So that if you have crossbred the commercial ones, but it is only an instance of chance. You can end up getting 50% less characteristics, or even 75%. But according to probability, that is the probability. 50% the same characteristics as the parent, 25% characteristic more than the parent, then 25% less characteristic than the parent. So some time back, there in the Philippines, there was a development of a GMO plant, the golden rice. That is one benefit of GMO plant. These plants help to prevent blindness in children, whereby most children were being born with having blindness. But they realized if you make these golden rice, it was GMO'd in the lab, then they came up with the golden rice. You know, the rice is usually white, but they made it to become brown there in the Philippines. Then they realized that these golden rice usually saved people from getting blindness. But you know, in this world, everything is not black and white, as I say, because you know there are those other industries that usually benefit from blindness. If you come up with such a solution to a problem, you see, it can look like it is bad, but if you come up with such a solution to a problem, those other companies won't be able to gain anything from it. So they will come in, then they will come up with their own propaganda, then they will create a narrative, then they will destroy what can really benefit a human being. So that is one instance of the benefit of GMO in the world. And also GMO has really helped in other industry like papaya, the papaya industry there in South America, whereby the papayas in the 1990s were getting extinct because of some certain diseases, but the papaya was genetically modified and it was able to survive till this age. So that is the difference between GMO and breeding. So in poultry industry, they do something known as selective breeding. But in the plants, you can do the GMO. But the only part that the GMO can enter into the poultry industry is whereby if you have chicken, then you can go and buy some seeds or some feed that has been GMO'd. That seed that when it was planted was GMO. That is the only part that the GMO can enter the poultry industry through the feed. Yes, because even most of these food that we usually eat, they are bioengineered, so that is not a big deal. So we have been eating GMO foods for a very long time. So GMO is here, and the only thing they usually do is that they don't label it as GMO, but GMO is here. So if you want to do your own poultry breeding, you have the chance to do your own poultry breeding. You can get your pure lines, then you can line breed them. In breeding, will lose some characteristics. It will take you a lot of money, but for the line breeding, it is a bit easier because it will just take you a shorter time. For example, if you have 100 chicken, you can get the best characteristic. Maybe you have 50 male and 50 female out of the 100. Then you get the best male, like the 10 best male from that pool. Then you also get the best 30 female. Because you know, for a good laying hen, it must have this very curvy back, like this. But if you have a chicken that has a flat back, that chicken is it will not lay. So that is just one characteristic. I have a lot of knowledge in the poultry industry, but sometimes I just give you bit by bit so that you can subscribe to the channel and stay around. So you know, I will give you a video of how a best laying hen should look, because you can say, oh, I have like 50 hen, but only 30 are laying. You can have just one chicken there that is sitting around and is eating a lot of feed and it is not laying. So you have to make sure that if you are doing the poultry rearing for the eggs, you have to really know what type of chicken that you're keeping there. Because some chicken are there, they're just eating and they're not laying eggs. So that is one thing. So you have to really know the better characteristics. You must know the characteristics first. The characteristics of a laying hen, how it should look like before you start the breeding. It is an easier task, but you can lose some characteristics, but it is a cheaper option because you know the cost of a parent stock. It is like 10 euros per chick. Here in Africa, it is like $10. And here in Africa, the cost of 1 day old chick, that is the cost of 1 day old chick. And the cost of 1 day old chick here in Africa, it is $1. $1 out of, so the parent stock is 10 times the price, because you know it takes a lot of time to come up with a parent stock. You can do cross breeding. Just make sure you are not being sold the chicks of the same character, the same variety. If you're doing cross breeding, you'll be able to achieve it at a cheaper price. But you'll lose some characteristics, but it won't hurt you so much. Yes, you may lose some characteristics or you may gain some characteristics. It's just a 50-50 chance. So the other one is like, but it's, for example, I usually think these people usually just make it. For example, if you are getting even 1,000 chicken, you usually get some chicken that do not grow, even if you are getting them from the F1 generation. Because if you try to do the math in those characteristics, there is always a recessive whereby you will find some chicken getting those characteristics whereby they won't be able to get all the characteristics from the parent. So that is the only bad part. But the better part is that if you do it yourself, if you just follow the guidebook very properly, you'll be able to achieve in this industry. And also for those guys who want to practice poultry breeding, Make sure if you want to practice poultry breeding in the best way, make sure you are giving your chicken the best feed. You know, here in Kenya, most people usually mess up. They want to do the poultry breeding and they are giving their chicken the layers mash. You don't give your chicken the layers mash. In poultry breeding, if you want to get a good offspring, you have to increase the protein content in the feed for the layers mash, for those chickens that have started laying. Because, you know, for the embryo, it must have enough protein for it to develop well, so that the chick can come from down with a very great force. But most people usually feed the layers mash. If you are feeding your chicken the layers mash for the breeding stock, oh God, you will get just inferior chicks. They won't be able to come up the way they should come up. So that is just another secret. So guys, if you really want to know the better thing in poultry farming, you know, most people usually out here, I've seen videos, they just give you vague. They give you vague things. You can't even contemplate and try to analyze and make sense out of it. Make sure you subscribe to the channel. I won't give you vague stuff. I will give you things that are realistic and things that will help you out. So subscribe and like the video. For those guys that want to support the channel, click down below, buy me a coffee. So that is the only instance. You can support the channel by buying me a coffee. Yes.